Here's Ryan Castle. He says, how do the helicopter parents of the millennial generation fit into RK? We haven't talked about RK for a while. If everybody drink, by the way. If parental involvement is typically a K-type trait, and helicopter parents who plan play dates and have every safety device imaginable, won't let their kids play out in the mud and get dirty, etc., are so involved in their kids' lives, why is my generation turned into the R generation? Ryan, I think off the top of my head here that you're equating what these helicopter parents do with good parenting. You're equating it with people who are good parents and who really engage with their kids and are doing that kind of K selection of, raising fit offspring. But in my opinion, this kind of overprotective parenting is actually a sign of extremely poor parenting. I think it's a sign of it in many cases, and I've seen these cases with my own eyes. I would describe it as a form of child abuse. I've seen children who are so coddled, not just coddled, actually encouraged to have temper tantrums and stuff that this is not K-type parenting. K parents, competitive parents like wolves, for those of you who are new to this giant substrata of the Stratosphere Lounge, the foundation that I've talked about so many times. But there are two reproductive strategies rather, that are successful, and you can isolate them as the R strategy, which is the reproductive rate strategy, and R species would be like a series of bunny rabbits. They don't have to make more fit bunny rabbits because there's plenty of clover out there. All they have to do is make as many bunny rabbits as they can. That's their strategy. Versus wolves, who are in a much more limited environment in terms of food and resources. So since there's so little food and resources out there, it doesn't make sense for wolves to have as many pups as they possibly can. They're just going to starve. The wolf strategy is to make their pups as capable as possible, make them good hunters and make them cooperative and teach them how to do these things. That's exactly what wolves do. So basically what he's saying here is it looks like these helicopter parents are doing all of this wolf-like kind of attention to the young, but I maintain it's just the opposite. I maintain that the one thing that you have to do if you love your kids is you got to love them enough to let them go, right? I mean, and this wasn't a tough decision, When I say let them go, I mean, I'm just talking about the kind of stuff that happened to us every day. I mean, it was just every day, and it was just not, you didn't even think about it. And what I mean by that is, Mom, I'm going out to play, or I'm riding my bike, or I'm going over to Steve's house or whatever. Okay. Be back by dinner at 7. Okay. Gone all day, on a Saturday. Do they know where you are? Nope. They don't. They don't have a clue. They just know you're going to be back by 7. And if you're not back by 7:15, they get a little angry. And if you're not back by 7:30, they get real angry. If you're not back by 8, then they start to get worried. I don't think this is fitness parenting. I think fit parents love their kids enough to be unpopular. That's another thing. I don't think these people love their kids enough to be unpopular with them. There's a big theory that goes out there, and heard it before, and it basically says the greatest generation was in fact the greatest generation in terms of what they accomplished, but in terms of parenting, they were maybe the worst. There's a lot of evidence for this, including my own father and many other cases I've heard. And basically what they're saying is, okay, my dad was born in 1925, and he grew up in the Depression. Well, the Depression was going on while he was growing up. He saw neighbors eating out of garbage cans. So you've got this whole incredible hardship and this incredible, fear and humiliation and all that other stuff in your teens, or you're even younger. And then the next thing you know, it's 1941, and now you're all going to ship off, and you have your choice of whether you want to get killed in the Ardennes or whether you want to get killed on Pacific Island. That's pretty much your choices. And it made them very tough. The Depression made them tough, made them tough soldiers. I think one of the reasons the Japanese attacked us was because they thought we were the 1920s roaring generation of people just wanted to sit around and drink champagne out of women's shoes. But turns out the Depression really hardened this country up a lot. And so I certainly don't blame them for this, but it's not hard to imagine that if you spend your youth, I mean, my dad was, he was at the Nuremberg trials underneath the gallows. He was 19 years old. He was standing there with a stopwatch. And that was extremely cush compared to the things that some of those people came home with. And so if your best friend is, is lying with you in a foxhole or on a beach someplace, and you turn to him and then you're just covered in a pink mist where he used to be, it's going to have an effect on you. It's going to make you stoic. It's going to make you stuff those emotions. You're going to have to learn how to get those horrible emotions under control, because you cannot afford to break down. You can't afford to have a sensitive moment. You got a machine gun nest that has to be taken out, so you have to man up and do it. And they learned how to do it. And they learned how to do it really well, and they had plenty of reason to learn how to do it, I think, the greatest generation. And when they came back to America, it seems to me that they got what they deserved, and that is it seemed to me that they just wanted things to be quiet. They like Perry Como and Lawrence Welk, and the music was not even the jazz or the swing of the 40s. The 50s music and stuff was this kind of easy, kind of instrumentals, and they didn't want any loud noises, and they didn't want any stress or strife. They didn't want any of that. And I keep saying they deserve their right to do that, and I'm not walking back from that statement. Go out and save the world. You pretty much have a right to do whatever you want to, I think. But basically the theory, and I think there's a lot of evidence for this, is that the greatest generation comes back, has the baby boom, which is me. I think I'm like in the last year or the last 2 years of the official definition of baby boom. And the boomers are going to overcompensate for the distance and the lack of emotion on the part of their parents, especially their fathers. And so since the boomers as children didn't get nearly as much affection or attention that they might have gotten if they'd had parents who hadn't seen their best friends turn to pink mist, they overcompensated. So the boomers had kids, and those kids were the millennials, and Gen X and Gen Y. You're kind of flipping around with the edges here, but basically. So you've got a generation, my generation, that felt extremely underserved emotionally in terms of their family life. And they simply overcompensated. They decided, well, if my dad was never around, and if my dad was always the guy who made the decision to, he's not going to be at the baseball game because he's busy, he's got a job, he's got a meeting that day. It hurts enough when you're a kid growing up with parents like that you make a decision one way or another as a baby boomer, and you just basically say to yourself, look, if I have kids and I am ever confronted with the choice of the baseball game or the business meeting, I'll take the baseball game. I'm going to take the baseball game. And again, none of this is, you can't blame the greatest generation for their attitude, and you can't blame the boomers for that either. But they basically coddled their kids. And I've noticed this before, said it a few times. I can tell automatically when a dad is not a good dad, especially if I've got the evidence in front of me. It's not to say he doesn't love his kids. It's not to say he's not trying hard. That's not what I'm saying at all. He probably loves them more than anything. He certainly does. And this may be all he knows. But as far as effectiveness as a father, he's not very good. If you hear a kid screaming at the top of their lungs on an airplane right behind you, or on the floor, literally on the floor, having a temper tantrum in Walmart because they didn't get the toy that they wanted, and the first thing that the father says is, "What's the matter, buddy?" And there's your problem. These parents, these boomer parents, wanted to be their kids' friends. They wanted to be friends with them. Part of them is they didn't get the childhood they wanted, and they want to bond so close to their kids that they're going to be friends. You can't be a kid's friend and his parent at the same time. You just can't do it. And so, to go back to the question, by the time you get to the millennials, you're probably 2 generations into this kind of overcompensation, where the entire idea of a play date is repugnant to me, and I think it's child abuse. You cannot. Well, let me just say this: it's never happened before in history where children that young have been living a life that is that structured and that neurotic. Really, it's just really that neurotic. The whole purpose of childhood is to go out and explore things and make friends, and you discover things, and you go places you haven't been before, and maybe you ride further on your bike than you've ever been, and then you find out, my God, I'm lost, or it's late, and you come home and you survive it, and your confidence goes up. So when you hear parents talking about play dates, and they get out their I was going to say it used to be get out their their little pocket organizers. Now they get out their iPhones. They say, well, you know, Jeremy can make he can make Thursday between 3 and 4:30. No, that's not going to be good for me. I'm going to be I'm going to have Blake is going to be at the you know, at his Pilates class. How about a week from tomorrow? Can we do 9 o'clock on Saturday morning? Maybe. Let me just check. I'll confirm. Not only do kids not need that kind of structure, not only do kids not need that kind of neurotic level of control, kids also need to see their friends more often. When I was growing up, I lived with my friends. I mean, I went to school with them, and when I got home, I dropped off my books, and then I went out and hung out with them. I hung out with them until it was dark, and I had to go home. And then the first thing I did in the morning on a Saturday was go hang out with my friends. I spent the whole day with them all the time. And we just had a blast. We were riding our bikes and playing baseball and doing all the rest of the stuff. Riding out to the youth fair from Key Biscayne. That was probably a 25, 30-mile bicycle ride. That's a long way to go when you're 12. And so these kids, not only do they not get to just the freedom of hanging out with friends and picking their own friends, they also get to see them once every 7, 8 days because of scheduling conflicts. We didn't have scheduling conflicts. We weren't scheduled. Everybody was just, come home, you're a kid, you're free, your time is free. What possibly could we schedule you with? So I know I've gone off on a whole oration, but that is kind of the point of the show after all, isn't it? That this idea that these parents, Ryan, are K-type parents because they spend the helicopter parents that hover over the kids. I don't think they're K-type parents at all. I think a K-type parent would have enough confidence in himself or herself and enough love for that kid to risk it. That's another thing too. I've been thinking an awful lot about cowardice lately. It's a term that's not used very often in the society anymore, but it's actually a rather useful way to think about things. If you start thinking in terms of cowardice, then gun control makes all kind of sense and all the rest of it. But a helicopter parent who hovers over their kids and never lets the kid out of sight and is constantly getting them to their violin lessons at 6 and scheduling their play dates and all that other stuff. They're not just doing that kid a disservice. I think they're doing it because they're afraid. They're afraid that something's going to happen to the kid, and they're afraid that they're going to lose that child, and that child is so much the center of their lives. And all parents feel that way. But if you love your kids enough, you don't want them to be tied to your apron strings, right? I mean, it's part of growing up. Get out. Go. Where are you going? Get out. What do you mean, Dad? And it's like, go outside and play. Okay. So it's a form of cowardice. They don't want anything to happen to their kids, and so they make sure by doing that, by making sure that nothing can ever happen to these kids, they make sure that the kids are kids for the rest of their lives. They'll be infants until they die. What's going to happen to these millennials when their parents die? Well, we know what's going to happen. They're gonna turn to the government to be taken care of, and that's why we eliminated all this stuff. It's why we had all of these programs like self-esteem movement and all the rest. When those kids are incapable of fending for themselves, they turn to their parents. Doesn't matter if they're 40 or not. And when their parents aren't there, they're going to turn to somebody. And guess who's going to be standing there ready to go with us? Just a little tiny form to sign on a clipboard saying, "We'll be happy to take care of all your problems for you. We'll provide you with free health care. We'll provide you with free college. And we'll provide you with free housing. We'll provide you with free transportation. And all we ask in exchange is that you vote for us every 2 years and that we get to take all of the money you make when you work. We get to take all of your work effort. We'll take all of it in taxes, and we'll give you back 15 cents on the dollar." Wow. Okay. So anyway, moving on here. What are we doing on time?